He thought burying his wife was the hardest thing he'd ever do, but when a stranger handed him keys to a sealed mansion worth $300 million, Marcus Reed discovered some inheritances come with secrets powerful enough to destroy what's left of his shattered life. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The alarm clock screamed at 3:45 in the morning, and Marcus Reed's hand shot out from under the thin blanket to silence it before the sound could wake Lily. His daughter needed sleep more than he needed those extra 7 minutes. She'd been having nightmares again, the kind where she called out for her mummy in a voice so small and broken it made Marcus want to put his fist through the bedroom wall. But he didn't. He never did. Instead, he dragged himself out of the sagging mattress, his back aching from the factory shift he'd finished just 5 hours ago, and shuffled toward the bathroom of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania. The fluorescent light flickered twice before staying on, casting everything in that harsh, unforgiving glow that made his face look older than 34. The mirror didn't lie. Dark circles carved shadows beneath his eyes. Stubble covered his jaw because he hadn't had time to shave in 3 days. His hair, once dark and thick, now showed threads of grey at the temples. 8 months. That's how long it had been since Sarah died. 8 months since cancer took the only woman he'd ever loved and left him alone with a 6-year-old daughter who still set a place for Mummy at dinner sometimes. Marcus turned on the shower and waited for the water to heat up. It never got more than lukewarm, but it was enough. While the water ran, he looked at the small shelf above the toilet where Sarah's things still sat untouched. Her lavender lotion, the cheap drugstore perfume she wore every day, the hair ties she always left scattered everywhere. He couldn't bring himself to move them. Lily needed to see them there, needed to know her mother had existed in this space, had been real. The shower was quick, mechanical. Soap, rinse, done. He dried off with a towel that had seen better days and pulled on his work clothes. Jeans with paint stains on the knees, a faded flannel shirt, steel-toed boots that were splitting at the seams. His construction job started at 5:30, and he had a 20-minute drive ahead of him. Before leaving, he crept into Lily's room. She was sprawled across her twin bed, one arm hanging off the edge, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in the other. Her blonde hair, so much like Sarah's, fanned across the pillow. She looked peaceful in sleep, and Marcus allowed himself to just watch her for a moment. This little person was his entire world now. Everything he did, every extra shift, every missed meal, every exhausted decision, it was all for her. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. She stirred but didn't wake. He'd left a note on the kitchen table for Mrs. Patterson, their downstairs neighbor who came up every morning to get Lily ready for school. God bless that woman. She refused to take more than $20 a week, even though Marcus knew it was worth 10 times that. The drive to the construction site took him through the sleeping town. Willow Creek wasn't much to look at. A main street with half the shops boarded up, a diner that served weak coffee and strong gossip. A post office, a library, 2 churches, and a gas station that charged too much because it was the only one for 15 miles. This was home, for better or worse. Marcus pulled into the gravel lot just as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. His crew was already there, Tommy, Jake, and Old Man Henderson, who'd been framing houses since before Marcus was born. They nodded at him, and he nodded back. They didn't talk much, especially not about personal things. They knew about Sarah. Everyone in Willow Creek knew. The casseroles had stopped coming around month 3, and that was fine by Marcus. He didn't need pity. He needed work. The day was brutal. They were framing a new addition on the McCarthy house, and the wood was green, heavy, unwieldy. Marcus's hands, already calloused and scarred, split open twice. He wrapped them in electrical tape and kept going. He needed this paycheck. Lily's school had a field trip coming up, $35, and he was still short. During lunch, sitting on a stack of 2x4s with a sandwich that was mostly bread, Tommy mentioned something about the lottery. How some guy in Pittsburgh won $17 million. How he'd never work another day in his life. "What would you do?" Tommy asked, looking at Marcus. "If you won that kind of money?" Marcus chewed slowly, thinking. "Pay off medical bills, get Lily into a better school, fix my car, maybe sleep for a week." Tommy laughed. "Man, you gotta dream bigger than that." But Marcus didn't. He couldn't afford dreams bigger than making it through the next month. The shift ended at 2:30, and Marcus drove straight to the factory where his night shift started at 4. He had 90 minutes. He used 30 of them to pick Lily up from school, take her to Mrs. Patterson's, and listen to her chatter about her day. She'd drawn a picture in art class. A family, stick figure Daddy, stick figure Lily, and up in the corner, floating among crayon clouds, stick figure Mummy with angel wings. "It's beautiful, baby," Marcus said, his throat tight. "Miss Cooper said Mummy's watching over us," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Is that true, Daddy?" Marcus pulled her close. "Yeah, sweetheart, she's always watching." He left Lily with Mrs. Patterson, promising to be back by midnight, and drove to the factory. The building was massive, metal, windowless. It made industrial parts for agricultural equipment. Marcus worked the press, feeding sheets of steel into machines that stamped and cut with deafening precision. The noise was so loud he wore earplugs, and the heat was oppressive even in winter. But it paid $12 an hour, and he needed every cent. The hours blurred. Feed the machine, watch the press, clear the parts, repeat. His mind wandered to Sarah. It always did during these shifts. He remembered the night they met, 15 years ago, at a bonfire party outside town. She'd been wearing a red flannel shirt and laughing at something her friend said. Their eyes met across the fire, and Marcus knew, just knew, she was going to change his life. They married young, 21 and 20 respectively. Everyone said they were crazy, but they didn't care. They built a life together. It wasn't fancy. Sarah worked at the library. Marcus did construction. They saved up and bought a small house with a yard where Lily could play. They were happy. Genuinely, simply happy. Then, 3 years ago, Sarah found the lump. Stage 3 breast cancer. The doctors said they caught it in time, but they hadn't. The treatments bought them 2 more years. 2 years of hospitals, chemotherapy, radiation, hope, and heartbreak. She fought so hard. God, she fought. But in the end, cancer didn't care about fight. It didn't care about 6-year-old daughters or husbands who couldn't imagine life without their wives. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in February. Marcus was holding her hand. Lily was at school. Sarah's last words were, "Take care of our girl." He'd sold the house to pay the medical bills. Even with insurance, the costs had been staggering. They'd lost everything. The house, the savings, the future they'd planned. Marcus moved them into the apartment, took the factory job in addition to construction, and tried to hold together the pieces of a life that felt irreparably shattered. The factory shift ended at midnight. Marcus clocked out, exhausted to his bones, and drove home through empty streets. The apartment was dark except for the small lamp Mrs. Patterson always left on. She was asleep on the couch, and Marcus gently woke her. "She went down easy tonight," Mrs. Patterson whispered, gathering her things. "Ate all her dinner, did her homework, asked about you constantly." "Thank you, Margaret," Marcus said, pressing 2 20s into her hand. She tried to refuse, but he insisted. She finally took it and squeezed his arm. "You're doing good, Marcus. Sarah would be proud." He hoped so. He really, really hoped so. After she left, Marcus checked on Lily, still sleeping soundly. He stood in her doorway watching the rise and fall of her small chest, and felt the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He was all she had. He couldn't fail her. He wouldn't. He collapsed onto his own bed without bothering to undress. Sleep came hard and fast, and when the alarm screamed at 3:45 again, it felt like he'd only closed his eyes for seconds. This was his life now. Work, Lily, sleep, repeat. There was no room for anything else. No hobbies, no friends, no dating, God no. Just survival, one day at a time. On Thursday, during his lunch break at the construction site, Marcus drove to the post office to check his P.O. box. He'd had to get one after the apartment's mailbox was broken into twice. Most of what waited for him was junk. Credit card offers he'd never qualify for, grocery store circulars, past due notices he was already aware of. But there was one envelope that stood out, cream-colored, heavy stock, with a return address from Philadelphia. Castellano and Associates, attorneys at law. Marcus turned it over in his hands, frowning. He didn't know any lawyers in Philadelphia. He didn't know any lawyers anywhere. His first thought was collections, maybe someone finally suing him over the medical debt. His stomach churned. He tore it open right there in the parking lot. Dear Mr. Reed, our firm represents the estate of Eleanor Whitmore, who passed away on November 3rd of last year. We have been attempting to locate you regarding a matter of inheritance. It is imperative that you contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the estate and your late wife's connection to Mrs. Whitmore. Please call the number below to schedule an appointment. Time is of the essence, as there are tax and legal implications that require immediate attention. Sincerely, Robert Castellano, ESQ. Marcus read it 3 times. Eleanor Whitmore. He'd never heard that name in his life. Sarah had never mentioned anyone named Eleanor. This had to be a mistake, or worse, some kind of scam. People preyed on grieving widowers. He'd read about it online. He crumpled the letter and tossed it in the passenger seat. He had 15 minutes left of lunch and half a sandwich to finish, but the letter gnawed at him. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, he smoothed out the crumpled paper and read it again. The firm looked legitimate when he Googled it. Castellano and Associates, established in 1978, specializing in estate law and probate. Their website showed a professional office in downtown Philadelphia, partner bios, case results. Still, Marcus hesitated. He didn't have time for wild goose chases. And even if this was real, even if someone had left Sarah something, it was probably minor. Maybe an old piece of jewelry, a small savings bond. Nothing that would justify taking time off work, losing a day's pay, driving 2 hours to Philadelphia. He set the letter on the kitchen table and tried to forget about it. But Friday, another letter came. Same cream envelope, same firm. This one was more urgent. Mr. Reed, we have attempted to reach you by phone and mail. This is a time-sensitive matter involving a substantial estate. Failure to respond may result in legal complications and forfeiture of inheritance rights. We strongly urge you to contact us immediately. Substantial estate. Those words made Marcus pause. He looked at the phone number again, then at the clock. It was 7 in the evening, probably too late to call. But when he dialed, someone answered on the second ring. Castellano and Associates, how may I direct your call? Marcus cleared his throat. Yeah, I got a letter. My name's Marcus Reed. There was a pause, then a click. Another voice came on, older, male, authoritative. Mr. Reed, this is Robert Castellano. I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. I just got the first letter yesterday, Marcus said defensively. I understand. Mr. Reed, I need to ask you some questions. Was your wife, Sarah Elizabeth Reed, maiden name Hartley? Marcus's chest tightened. Yes. And she passed away in February of this year. Yes. His voice cracked slightly. I'm very sorry for your loss. Mr. Reed, your wife was the sole living heir of Eleanor Whitmore, her great-aunt. Miss Whitmore passed away in November, and her will specifically names your wife, or in the event of her death, her surviving family. Marcus sat down hard in the kitchen chair. I don't understand. Sarah never mentioned any Eleanor. That's not surprising. There was a family estrangement dating back several generations. Eleanor had been trying to locate Sarah for the last 10 years, but by the time she found her, Sarah had already passed. The estate is complex, Mr. Reed, and we need to meet in person to discuss the details. What kind of estate are we talking about? Marcus asked, his heart pounding. There was a long pause. Substantial property, assets, and collections. I can't discuss specifics over the phone, but I assure you this is worth your time. Can you come to our office Monday morning? Monday, Marcus mentally calculated. He'd have to call off construction, lose a day's pay, find someone to watch Lily, but something in Castellano's voice told him this was real. Yeah, Marcus said. I can be there. Excellent. 10 o'clock. Bring identification and your marriage certificate if you have it. After hanging up, Marcus sat in the dark kitchen, his mind racing. Substantial property, substantial assets. What did that even mean? A house? Money? He didn't dare hope for anything life-changing. Hope was dangerous when you'd already lost everything. That weekend dragged. Marcus told Lily they were taking a trip to the city Monday, made it sound like an adventure. She was excited, asking if they'd see tall buildings and museums. He promised they would if there was time. Saturday and Sunday he worked construction, unable to shake the nervous energy building in his chest. Tommy noticed. You good, man? Tommy asked, handing Marcus a drill. Yeah, Marcus lied. Just tired. Monday morning came. Marcus dressed in his only nice outfit, khakis with a small stain on the knee, a button-down shirt Sarah had bought him for a wedding 3 years ago, and shoes that desperately needed polish. Lily wore her favorite dress, purple with white flowers, and brought her backpack full of coloring books. The drive to Philadelphia took 2 hours. Lily chattered the whole way, pointing at cows and barns and trucks. Marcus tried to focus on her excitement rather than his gnawing anxiety. The city rose up around them, tall and intimidating. Marcus had only been to Philadelphia twice in his life, both times with Sarah. The memories hit him hard as he navigated the unfamiliar streets, following his phone's GPS to the address on the letter. Castellano and Associates occupied the 7th floor of a glass building in Center City. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of place that made Marcus acutely aware of the stain on his khakis. Lily's eyes went wide. "Daddy, this is fancy," she whispered. "Yeah, baby, it is." The elevator ride made his stomach drop. The reception area was just as intimidating. Leather chairs, abstract art, a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Marcus Reed," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "I have a 10 o'clock with Mr. Castellano." She smiled warmly, which helped. "Of course, Mr. Reed. He's expecting you. Would your daughter like some juice and crackers while you wait?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, and the receptionist led her to a small waiting area with toys and books. Marcus watched his daughter settle in, then followed another assistant down a long hallway to a corner office with windows overlooking the city. Robert Castellano stood when Marcus entered. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. But his handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Marcus sat in the leather chair across from the massive desk. The office smelled like expensive coffee and old books. Castellano opened a thick folder. "I'll get right to it. Eleanor Whitmore was your wife's great-aunt, her maternal grandmother's sister. The family had a falling out in the 1940s over an inheritance dispute. Eleanor married well, very well, to a man named Frederick Whitmore. He made his fortune in manufacturing and investments. They had no children." Marcus nodded, trying to follow. "When Frederick died in 1979, he left everything to Eleanor. She spent the last 45 years managing that wealth and, apparently, searching for her estranged family. She hired private investigators, genealogists, spent considerable resources trying to find her sister's descendants." "She found Sarah?" Marcus asked. "Yes, about 8 years ago. But Eleanor was elderly, cautious. She wanted to approach Sarah carefully, worried about seeming like she was after something or disrupting her life. By the time she made the decision to reach out, she discovered Sarah had passed. Eleanor died 6 months later. Her will is very specific. Everything goes to Sarah's surviving family. Marcus's mouth was dry. What is everything? Castellano slid a document across the desk. A 50-acre estate in rural Pennsylvania outside Pittsburgh. The property includes a 1920s stone mansion, outbuildings, and all contents therein. Marcus stared at the document. There were photos. A massive Gothic-style mansion with towers and arched windows surrounded by overgrown gardens and ancient trees. The property has been sealed since 1979, Castellano continued. Eleanor maintained it through a trust, but she never lived there after Frederick died. The mansion contains their personal effects, furniture, collections. We don't have a complete inventory. Why didn't she live there? Marcus asked. Too many memories, I assume. She moved to a smaller property in Philadelphia, but she couldn't bring herself to sell the estate. She preserved it, maintained it, and waited to give it to family. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he held the photos. What's it worth? Castellano hesitated. The land alone is appraised at $2.3 million. The mansion, in its current condition, adds another $1 million, possibly more with restoration. But Mr. Reed, there's something you need to understand. The property taxes are substantial, approximately $75,000 per year. The trust that paid them has been depleted. You'll be responsible for those taxes going forward. The number hit Marcus like cold water. $75,000 per year. He made $32,000 total from both his jobs. I can't afford that, Marcus said quietly. I understand. Most heirs in this situation sell the property immediately. I have contacts with real estate firms who specialize in estates like this. We could have it listed within a month. Marcus looked at the photos again. The mansion was beautiful, even in disrepair. He imagined Sarah seeing this, imagined what she would have thought knowing her family, her blood, had lived in such a place. There's one condition in the will, Castellano said. You must inspect the property in person before making any decisions about its disposal. Eleanor was very specific about this. She wanted the heir to see it, to understand what they were inheriting before choosing to sell. Marcus looked up. When? At your convenience. I can arrange access whenever you're ready. What about the contents? Marcus asked. You said furniture, collections. Is any of that valuable? We honestly don't know. The estate has been sealed for over 40 years. Eleanor left instructions that nothing was to be removed or inventoried until the heir took possession. There could be antiques, artwork, personal items, or it could be worthless. We simply don't know. Marcus sat back, his mind reeling. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. He was a factory worker, a construction laborer, a widowed father barely keeping his head above water. He wasn't the kind of person who inherited million-dollar estates. I know this is overwhelming, Castellano said gently. Take some time to process. But Mr. Reed, I do need to advise you that time is a factor. The property taxes for this year are due in 60 days. If they're not paid, the county can initiate foreclosure proceedings. 60 days. Marcus did the math. Even if he sold immediately, could it close in 60 days? And what if it didn't sell? What if he got stuck with a property he couldn't afford and couldn't unload? I need to see it, Marcus heard himself say. The mansion. I need to see what's inside. Castellano nodded. Of course, I'll make arrangements with the property management company. They've been maintaining the grounds and security system. When would you like to go? Marcus thought about his jobs, his responsibilities, Lily's school. Then he thought about Sarah, about her family she'd never known, about a great-aunt who'd spent years searching for her. This weekend, Marcus said. I'll go this weekend. Castellano pulled out a small wooden box from his desk drawer. Inside, resting on velvet, were 3 brass keys. They were old, ornate, heavy with age and significance. These are the original keys Frederick Whitmore had made in 1926 when the house was built, Castellano explained. Eleanor wanted them passed directly to the heir, not held by the property management company. Marcus took the keys. They were cold in his palm, solid, real. This was happening. This was actually happening. Castellano also handed him a sealed envelope, aged and yellowed. Eleanor left this for Sarah, or whoever inherited. She asked that it not be opened until you're at the estate. The letter felt light in Marcus's other hand, but it carried the weight of decades, of family secrets, of a great-aunt's final words to a niece she'd never met. "One more thing," Castellano said. "The property management company reported unusual activity around the estate in recent months. Nothing criminal, but people asking questions, cars driving by slowly. The estate has been a local mystery for years. Once word gets out that it's been inherited, you may receive attention. I'd advise discretion." "Attention from who?" Marcus asked. "Collectors, treasure hunters, curiosity seekers? There are rumors about what Frederick Whitmore collected, about what might be inside that mansion. Most of it is probably nonsense, but rumors have a way of attracting the wrong kind of interest." Marcus pocketed the keys and the letter. "I'll be careful." Walking out of that office, Lily's hand in his, Marcus felt like he was in a dream. In the elevator, Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, what did the fancy man say?" Marcus knelt down to her level. "He said Great-Grandma Sarah's family left us a big house." Lily's eyes went wide. "Like a castle?" Marcus smiled, thinking of the Gothic towers in the photos. "Yeah, baby. Kind of like a castle." "Can we live there?" Marcus's smile faded. "I don't know yet. We have to go see it first." The drive home was quiet. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, and Marcus's mind raced with possibilities and fears. What was inside that mansion? Why had Eleanor sealed it for 40 years? What had she wanted Sarah to find? And the bigger question, the one that terrified him most, what was he supposed to do with an estate he couldn't afford to keep but couldn't bear to sell without understanding? He thought about Sarah constantly. What would she want him to do? She'd always been practical, grounded. She would probably say sell it, take the money, secure Lily's future. But there was another side to Sarah, the dreamer, the romantic. She'd loved old things, history, stories. She would have wanted to see it, to touch the things her ancestors touched, to walk the halls they walked. "I'll see it for you," Marcus whispered into the quiet car. "I'll see it for both of us." That night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the keys and the sealed letter. He turned the keys over in his hands, feeling their weight, their age. They'd opened the same locks for nearly 100 years, had been held by Frederick Whitmore, by Eleanor, and now by him. The letter sat unopened. Castellano had said not to open it until he was at the estate. Marcus respected that. Whatever Eleanor had wanted to say, she'd wanted it said in that place, surrounded by her memories. He made a decision. This weekend, he'd take Lily to the mansion. They'd open those doors together. They'd see what Eleanor had left behind, what she'd wanted her family to know. And then, with all the information, he'd make a choice about their future. But deep in his gut, Marcus knew this was bigger than property taxes and real estate value. This was about legacy, about family, about secrets that had been locked away for 4 decades. And something told him that when those doors opened, everything was going to change. The Saturday morning drive started before dawn. Marcus had packed the Suburban with water bottles, snacks, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, and a flashlight he'd bought at the hardware store the day before. The keys to the Whitmore estate sat in his jacket pocket, their weight a constant reminder that this was real, that his life had somehow shifted into territory he couldn't quite comprehend. Lily was excited in the way only 6-year-olds can be, asking questions faster than Marcus could answer them. "Is it really a castle, Daddy? Will there be princesses? Can we stay there forever?" He answered what he could, deflected the rest, and tried to quiet the nervous energy building in his chest. The GPS led them west out of Willow Creek, through rolling Pennsylvania countryside that grew increasingly rural with each passing mile. They drove through towns smaller than theirs, past farms where cows grazed in morning mist, past forests so thick the trees formed tunnels over the road. Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the world blur past, occasionally pointing at horses or red barns or anything that caught her imagination. 2 hours in, the GPS directed them off the main highway onto a 2-lane road with more cracks than asphalt. Marcus slowed, navigating potholes and frost heaves. This area felt forgotten, like time had decided to leave it behind and move on to places with better prospects. "Are we lost?" Lily asked, a hint of worry creeping into her voice. "No, baby, just getting close." Another 15 minutes on increasingly narrow roads, and then the GPS announced their destination. Marcus almost missed it. The entrance was nearly hidden by overgrown hedges and wild vegetation that had consumed whatever landscaping once existed. But there, set back from the road, were massive iron gates. They were black, ornate, and closed with a heavy chain and padlock that looked newer than everything else. Marcus pulled the Suburban onto the gravel shoulder and stepped out. The air was different here, cooler, heavier somehow. The wind moved through the trees with a sound like whispered warnings. He approached the gates and saw the property management company's padlock. Castellano had said they'd be informed of his arrival, that the lock would be left open. He pulled on it. It clicked open immediately. Marcus removed the chain, and the gates swung inward with a groan that echoed across the empty landscape. Beyond them, a driveway disappeared into dense woods, trees arching overhead to form a shadowed corridor. Lily had climbed out of the car and stood beside him now, her small hand finding his. "It looks spooky," she whispered. "It's just old," Marcus said, squeezing her hand. "Old places always look a little spooky." They drove through the gates slowly, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The driveway wound through the forest for what felt like half a mile. Branches scraped against the Suburban's roof. The canopy was so thick that even mid-morning felt like dusk. Then the trees opened up, and Marcus's breath caught. The mansion rose before them like something from another era, another world. It was massive, 3 stories of grey stone with towers at each corner, Gothic arched windows and a slate roof that looked like it had survived a century of harsh winters. Ivy climbed the walls, not decoratively but aggressively, like nature was slowly reclaiming what had been built on her land. The grounds around it had once been gardens. Marcus could see the remnants of stone pathways and what might have been flower beds, but now everything was overgrown, wild, beautiful in a haunted sort of way. "Wow," Lily breathed. "It really is a castle." Marcus parked in the circular drive in front of the main entrance. Up close, the mansion was even more imposing. The front doors were solid wood, maybe 8 feet tall, with iron fixtures that had oxidized to a dull green. Above the doors, carved into the stone lintel, were the words, "Whitmore Estate, Anno Domini, 1926. He helped Lily out of the car and stood for a moment, just taking it in. Somewhere in his bloodline, people had lived here. Sarah's great-great-grandparents had walked through those doors, had looked out those windows, had called this place home. The thought made his chest tight. The property management company had left a note tucked into the door handle. Brief, professional. Security system disarmed, utilities on temporary power, inspect at your own risk. Structure has not been occupied since 1979. Call if you need anything. A phone number followed. Marcus pocketed the note and pulled out the brass keys. There were 3 of them on the ring, each slightly different. The first one he tried didn't fit. The second slid in smoothly, and when he turned it, something deep in the door mechanism clicked. The sound was crisp, clear, like the lock had been waiting 46 years for exactly this key. He pushed, and the door swung inward. The smell hit first: old air, dust, something like dried flowers and furniture polish and time itself. The interior was dark, the windows covered by heavy drapes that blocked out most of the morning light. Marcus found a light switch by the door and flicked it. Nothing happened. The note said temporary power, he muttered, pulling out his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a grand foyer that belonged in a museum. The floor was marble, black and white in a checkerboard pattern, though dulled by decades of dust. A chandelier hung from the ceiling 2 stories above, its crystals wrapped in gauze to protect them. The walls were wood-paneled, dark and rich, with paintings in gilded frames. A curved staircase swept up to the 2nd floor, its banister carved with intricate details that looked like vines and flowers. "Daddy, it's like a fairy tale," Lily whispered, her voice echoing slightly. Marcus moved the flashlight beam across the space. Every surface was covered in white sheets, protecting furniture from time and dust. Shapes lurked beneath the sheets: tables, chairs, cabinets, things he couldn't identify. It was like walking into a house that had been sealed mid-life, like the inhabitants had simply stood up one day and walked out, expecting to return tomorrow. To the left of the foyer, a doorway led to what looked like a parlor. To the right, a dining room. Straight ahead, past the staircase, the hallway stretched into darkness. Marcus chose the parlor first. He pulled back the sheet covering what turned out to be a sofa. Beneath it, the fabric was pristine, a deep burgundy velvet that looked like it had never been sat on. The coffee table in front of it was solid mahogany, its surface polished to a mirror shine under the dust. On the mantel above a marble fireplace, photographs sat in silver frames. Marcus wiped the dust from one with his sleeve. A couple stared back at him. A man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a confident smile, his arm around a woman with dark hair and pearls at her throat. They stood in front of this very mansion, young trees visible in the background. "Frederick and Eleanor," Marcus whispered. He moved through the room, uncovering more furniture, more glimpses of a life lived. Books lined built-in shelves, their spines faded but titles still readable. Classic literature, philosophy, art history. A record player sat in the corner with albums stacked beside it. Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, Benny Goodman. A smoking pipe rested in an ashtray, as if Frederick had set it down 46 years ago and might pick it up again at any moment. Lily had found the dining room. Marcus heard her gasp and followed the sound. The dining table was enormous, could easily seat 20 people, and it was set. Plates, silverware, crystal glasses, all arranged perfectly, all covered in dust, but otherwise ready for guests who would never arrive. "Why did they leave everything?" Lily asked. Marcus didn't have an answer. Castellano had said Eleanor couldn't bear to return after Frederick died, but to leave it all exactly as it was. That spoke to something deeper than grief. That spoke to a kind of preservation, like she was keeping his memory alive by keeping his world intact. They explored the 1st floor room by room, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a rolling ladder, a conservatory with windows on 3 sides, dead plants in beautiful pots, a kitchen that looked like it was from the 1950s, with a vintage refrigerator and a stove that probably weighed more than Marcus's car. Everywhere they looked, life had been frozen mid-moment. The 2nd floor held bedrooms, 6 of them, each furnished with 4-poster beds and antique dressers and vanities with oval mirrors. The master bedroom was clearly Frederick and Eleanor's. Photographs of them covered the dresser top. Their clothes still hung in the closet, suits and dresses that smelled faintly of mothballs and lavender. In one bedroom, Marcus found what must have been Eleanor's personal study. A desk sat by the window, papers still scattered across its surface. He picked up a letter dated July 1979, addressed to someone named Catherine. The handwriting was elegant, careful. "Dear Catherine, I've decided I cannot return to the estate. Every room holds Frederick's ghost, and I am not strong enough to face them all. I've made arrangements to seal the house exactly as it is. Perhaps one day, when our family is reunited, someone will understand why I needed to preserve what we built together. Love, Eleanor. Marcus set the letter down carefully. He was beginning to understand. This wasn't just a house. It was a monument to love, to a life shared, to memories too precious to disturb. "Daddy, there's another door!" Lily called from the hallway. Marcus found her standing at the end of the second-floor corridor. There was indeed another door, but this one was different. It was steel, industrial-looking, completely out of place in the otherwise vintage aesthetic of the mansion. And it had 3 separate locks. His pulse quickened. Castellano had mentioned the contents of the estate, the collections, the things Eleanor had kept sealed. Was this it? He pulled out the brass keys. The first lock opened easily. The second took some wiggling, years of disuse making it stiff. The third clicked with a finality that made the hair on Marcus's neck stand up. He pulled the door open and found stairs leading down, not to a basement, but to something else. The stairs were stone, the walls concrete. Modern lighting fixtures lined the ceiling, and when Marcus flipped the switch at the top of the stairs, they flickered to life. "Stay close to me," he told Lily. They descended together, Marcus's hand on her shoulder. The stairwell turned twice, going deeper than he expected. At the bottom was a corridor, climate-controlled and well-lit, lined with more steel doors. Each door had a brass plaque beside it. Collection Room 1, Collection Room 2, Collection Room 3. Marcus counted. There were 8 doors total. His hands were shaking as he approached the first door. It wasn't locked, just closed with a heavy handle. He pulled it down, and the door swung open. The room beyond took his breath away. It was huge, maybe 30 feet by 40 feet, with walls lined floor to ceiling with built-in shelving, and on those shelves, books, thousands of them. But not just any books. These were old, leather-bound, some with gold leaf on the spines. Marcus stepped closer, his footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. He pulled one book at random. It was a first edition of Moby Dick, published in 1851. He knew because there was a small card tucked inside the front cover, written in Eleanor's handwriting. First edition, purchased from Patterson's Rare Books, New York, April 1962. Appraised value, $8,500. $8,000 for one book. Marcus's legs felt weak. He moved along the shelves, pulling more cards. A first edition of The Great Gatsby, appraised at $35,000. An early printing of Shakespeare's complete works from 1700, appraised at $120,000. A Gutenberg Bible fragment, appraised at $250,000. He did rough math in his head and stopped when he reached $5 million worth of books in this one room. "Daddy, what are all these?" Lily asked, running her fingers along the spines. "They're books, baby. Very, very old books." He backed out of the room slowly, his mind reeling. If one room held this much value, what was in the others? Collection Room 2 was art. Paintings covered every wall, hung salon-style from floor to ceiling. Marcus recognized some of the names from museum visits with Sarah. Impressionists, modernists, abstract expressionists. Each painting had a small plaque with the artist's name, the title, and again, Eleanor's careful notes about provenance and value. A Picasso sketch, $75,000. A Monet study, $180,000. A small Rothko, $350,000. Marcus stopped counting after he reached 10 million. Collection Room 3 held coins and currency. Glass cases displayed ancient Roman coins, gold pieces from empires that no longer existed, paper money from countries that had been renamed or absorbed. The collection was organized meticulously, each piece labeled, catalogued, valued. Room 4 was jewelry, not costume jewelry but real pieces. Diamond necklaces, emerald brooches, sapphire rings, strings of pearls that looked like they belonged in old Hollywood films. A single tiara, probably Edwardian era, was appraised at $220,000. Marcus had to sit down. He lowered himself to the floor of the corridor outside room 4, his back against the wall, and just breathed. Lily sat beside him, sensing something was wrong.
"Daddy, are you okay?"
"Yeah, baby. I just need a minute." But he wasn't okay. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Each room was a fortune. Each room represented wealth beyond anything he'd ever imagined, and there were 4 more rooms he hadn't opened yet. What happens next will shatter everything Marcus thought he knew about his wife's family, reveal secrets worth killing for, and force a father fighting to survive into a decision that could either save his daughter's future or destroy what's left of his life. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus forced himself to stand. He had to see the rest. He had to know what Frederick and Eleanor Whitmore had really left behind. Collection Room 5 was wine. Floor-to-ceiling climate-controlled racks held thousands of bottles. Marcus knew nothing about wine, but the cards told the story. Bottles from the 1800s, rare vintages from vineyards that no longer existed, champagnes that had been served at royal weddings. A single bottle of Chateau Lafite from 1869 was valued at $43,000. Room 6 held antique furniture, but not the kind from upstairs in the regular house. These were museum pieces. A desk that had belonged to Thomas Jefferson, appraised at $1.2 million. A chair from Versailles. A cabinet that had been in the Winter Palace in Russia before the Revolution. Each piece was protected under climate-controlled glass, preserved perfectly. Marcus's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He opened Room 7. Vintage automobiles, but in pieces. A dismantled Rolls-Royce from 1923. A Bugatti engine mounted on display. Steering wheels, headlamps, chrome fixtures from cars worth millions. Apparently, Frederick had been a collector, but he'd displayed the mechanical artistry rather than the whole vehicles. Each component was mounted like sculpture, beautiful and valuable. One door left, Collection Room 8. Marcus approached it slowly, Lily's hand in his. Whatever was behind this door, it would complete the picture. It would explain why Eleanor had sealed all of this away, why she'd spent decades maintaining and protecting and hiding it from the world. He opened the door. The room was different from the others. It was smaller, more intimate. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, showing Frederick and Eleanor's life together. Their wedding in 1942, trips around the world, parties they'd hosted, charitable work they'd done. The photos were arranged chronologically, a visual biography spanning 37 years of marriage. But in the center of the room stood a large glass case, and inside it were personal items. Frederick's medals from World War II, Eleanor's wedding dress, letters they'd written to each other, and a journal, leather-bound and thick, sitting open to the last entry. Marcus stepped closer and read Eleanor's handwriting, dated October 19, 79, just weeks after Frederick's death. "My dearest Frederick, I cannot bear to return to our home without you. Every room echoes with your absence, so I have decided to seal it all exactly as we left it until our family returns. I have spent the last months searching for our bloodline, for the family we never had the blessing to create ourselves. I found them, Frederick. I found your great-niece through your sister's line, and my great-niece through my brother's daughter. They don't know me, but someday they will. Someday they will stand where I stand now and understand what we built together, not for ourselves, but for them. All of this, every painting, every book, every precious thing we collected, it was never really ours. We were just caretakers, keeping these treasures safe until they could go to someone who would understand their true value. Not the money, Frederick, though there is a great deal of that, but the value of preservation, of beauty, of legacy. I hope whoever reads this will forgive an old woman's sentimentality. I hope they will see this collection not as wealth to be sold, but as a trust to be honored. With all my love, across whatever veil separates us, your Eleanor. Marcus read it 3 times, tears blurring his vision. Lily tugged his sleeve.
Daddy, why are you crying?
He knelt down and pulled her close, because great-great-aunt Eleanor loved great-great-uncle Frederick very much, and she wanted to give us something special. But even as he said it, Marcus's mind was spinning with the implications. This wasn't just a house with some antiques. This was easily $300 million worth of collections. Maybe more. The responsibility of it crashed over him like a wave. He was a factory worker who made $32,000 a year. He couldn't protect this. He couldn't secure it. He couldn't even afford the insurance premiums, let alone the property taxes. He stood and walked back through the corridor, looking at each room with new eyes. Eleanor had called them caretakers, keepers of treasures until they could pass them on. But to who? Lily was 6. What was she supposed to do with a Picasso or a first-edition Moby Dick? Back upstairs, the mansion felt different now. It wasn't just an old house frozen in time. It was a vault, a museum, a target for anyone who discovered what was hidden beneath its floors. Marcus found the letter Castellano had given him, the one Eleanor had sealed for Sarah. His hands trembled as he opened it. To my dear great-niece Sarah, or whoever inherits this estate. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have seen what Frederick and I spent a lifetime gathering. I imagine you are overwhelmed. I imagine you are frightened by the responsibility. But please, I beg you, do not make hasty decisions. Frederick and I had no children of our own. This collection became our legacy, our way of ensuring that beauty and history would survive beyond our brief lives. We always intended it for family, but we also understood that family might not want the burden. So I leave you this choice. Keep it, sell it, donate it. Do with it what your heart tells you is right. But whatever you choose, please take time to know it first. Walk these halls, touch these things, understand the love that went into gathering them. Frederick used to say that ownership is temporary, but stewardship is eternal. We were just stewards. Now you are. With hope that you will find peace in whatever decision you make, your great-aunt Eleanor. Marcus folded the letter carefully and sat on the grand staircase. Lily had found a bedroom upstairs and was playing with the old-fashioned dollhouse she'd discovered. Her laughter echoed through the empty halls, and it sounded wrong somehow, like joy had no place in a house built on preservation and memory. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Hope you and Lily are having fun. Don't worry about anything here. Fun. Right. If only she knew. Marcus walked through the mansion one more time, trying to think clearly. Eleanor had preserved this for family, but she'd also known the family might not be able to handle it. She'd given permission to sell, to walk away, to choose practical over sentimental. He could sell it all. Auction houses would jump at this collection. Castellano could arrange it. Within months, maybe a year, he'd have more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Lily would never want for anything. College covered. Her future secured. Every medical bill, every debt, every weight he'd carried since Sarah died gone. But standing in Frederick's study, looking at the man's pipe still resting in its ashtray, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Guilt. These people, Frederick and Eleanor, they'd spent 37 years together building something meaningful. They'd traveled the world, collected carefully, preserved meticulously. They'd created a time capsule of beauty and history, and they'd trusted that their family, strangers they'd never meet, would understand what they'd been trying to do. Selling it all felt like betrayal, like taking their life's work and scattering it to the highest bidders. But keeping it felt impossible. How could he, Marcus Reed, a man who couldn't afford to fix his own car, become the guardian of $300 million worth of treasures. As the afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows, Marcus made his way down to the basement corridor one more time. He stood in the middle of all 8 rooms and tried to imagine what Sarah would say. She'd always been practical, but she'd also been sentimental. She'd kept every letter he'd ever written her. She'd saved Lily's first drawings, her first lost tooth, her hospital bracelet from when she was born. Sarah believed in holding on to things that mattered. Would she want him to sell this? Or would she want Lily to grow up knowing that her family, her blood, had been part of something extraordinary? Marcus pulled out his phone and called Castellano. The lawyer answered immediately. "Mr. Reed, how is the inspection going?" Marcus couldn't find words. "It's more than you said." "I suspected it might be. Frederick Whitmore was an obsessive collector. We knew there were items of value, but without a full inventory we couldn't estimate. Mr. Castellano, there's $300 million down here, maybe more." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus Christ. What am I supposed to do with this?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "I can't protect this. I can't afford to keep it. I can't even wrap my head around what I'm looking at." "You sell it," Castellano said gently. "Marcus, I understand this feels overwhelming, but the practical answer is clear. You liquidate the collection through proper channels, pay the taxes, and set up trusts for your daughter's future. This is generational wealth, life-changing wealth." "But Eleanor wanted it kept together," Marcus said. "She called us stewards." "Eleanor was a romantic," Castellano replied. "She was also practical enough to give you permission to sell. She knew this was too much to ask of anyone." Marcus looked around at the treasures surrounding him. "What if I don't want to sell? What if I want to honor what they built?" Another pause. "Then you're looking at enormous overhead. Security, insurance, climate control, property taxes, legal fees to establish the estate as a non-profit or trust. You'd need experts, consultants, lawyers. Marcus, with all due respect, you're a working man with a daughter to raise. This would consume your life." "Maybe my life needs consuming," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do." He could hear Castellano's sigh through the phone. "Sleep on it. Don't make any decisions today. Go home, process what you've seen, think about Lily's future. We'll talk early next week." After hanging up, Marcus climbed the stairs back to the main floor. He found Lily in the library, carefully looking at picture books she'd pulled from the shelves. "Daddy, can we take some of these home?" she asked. Marcus's chest tightened. Home. Their tiny apartment with the broken heater and the neighbors who fought at 2 a.m. That was home. This place, this impossible, beautiful, terrifying place, was something else entirely. "Maybe, baby. We'll see." As they prepared to leave, Marcus took one last walk through the foyer. The sheets covering the furniture looked like ghosts in the fading light. He thought about Frederick and Eleanor walking these same floors, hosting parties, living their lives, never knowing that one day a widowed mechanic and his 6-year-old daughter would inherit everything they'd built. He locked the front door with the brass key and stood for a moment, listening. The wind moved through the overgrown gardens. Somewhere in the woods, a bird called. The mansion loomed behind him, patient, waiting. In the Suburban, driving back down the long driveway, Lily asked, "Are we coming back?" Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at the mansion disappearing behind the trees. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think we are." But he had no idea how. He had no idea what choice he'd ultimately make. All he knew was that his life had just gotten infinitely more complicated, and the weight of Frederick and Eleanor's legacy now rested entirely on his shoulders. The iron gates closed behind them with a hollow clang that sounded like destiny clicking into place. The news broke on Tuesday morning, 3 days after Marcus had returned from the Whitmore estate. He was halfway through his shift at the factory when Tommy rushed over, phone in hand, shouting over the noise of the machinery.
Dude, you're famous.
Marcus killed the press and pulled out his earplugs. What? Tommy shoved the phone in his face. The Willow Creek Gazette's website had a headline: Local widower inherits mysterious Whitmore estate, rumored to contain millions in hidden treasures. Marcus's stomach dropped. The article was short but damaging. It mentioned his name, Sarah's death, the fact that he'd inherited from a distant relative. Worse, it quoted sources close to the estate, speculating about the contents. Rare books, fine art, possibly even gold bullion. The comments section was already filling up with conspiracy theories and treasure hunters making plans.
How did they find out? Marcus muttered. Who cares, man? Is it true? Are you rich?
Marcus didn't answer. He walked away from the press, pulled off his gloves, and called Castellano. The lawyer answered on the first ring. I saw the article, Castellano said before Marcus could speak. I'm already working on damage control, but, Mr. Reed, I need to be honest with you. The property management company is required to file certain disclosures with the county. Those are public record. Once journalists start digging, they find things. What does this mean? Marcus asked, his voice tight. It means you need to make a decision soon. Every day that estate sits there with its contents known to the public is a day you're at risk. I've already received 3 calls this morning from auction houses asking to represent you, and one from a lawyer claiming he represents Frederick Whitmore's second cousin, who believes he has a claim to the estate. Marcus leaned against the factory wall, closing his eyes. Frederick didn't have a second cousin. I know. It's frivolous, but it's the beginning of what you can expect. Marcus, listen to me carefully. You need security at that property immediately. I'm talking professional security, cameras, patrols, and you need to decide whether you're selling or keeping, because the longer you wait, the more complicated this becomes. After the call, Marcus tried to return to work, but his supervisor pulled him aside. Reed, you need to take the rest of the day. You're a liability when you're distracted, and those presses will take your hand off if you're not paying attention. Marcus didn't argue. He clocked out and drove to Lily's school. It was barely noon, but he needed to see her, needed to make sure she was okay. When he arrived at the office, the principal, Mrs. Hendricks, was waiting. Mr. Reed, we need to talk. His heart stopped. Is Lily okay? She's fine, she's in class. But we had an incident this morning. A man showed up claiming to be a family friend, said he was here to pick Lily up early. He knew your name, knew about your wife's passing, knew about the inheritance. Our staff didn't release Lily, of course, but Mr. Reed, we need to update her emergency contact procedures immediately. Marcus felt ice in his veins. What did he look like? Mid-40s, suit, very polite. He left when we asked for identification. She handed Marcus a business card. He gave us this. The card read, Graham Associates, Estate Acquisition Specialists. A phone number, nothing else. They're vultures, Marcus said quietly. They're trying to pressure me through my daughter. Mrs. Hendricks's face hardened. I've called the police. They're sending an officer to take a report. Mr. Reed, I don't know what's going on with this inheritance, but you might want to consider keeping Lily home for a few days until things settle. Marcus picked Lily up early, signing her out with shaking hands. In the car, she asked why he was there. Just wanted to spend the afternoon with you, baby, he said, forcing a smile. But that night after she was asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. The apartment felt smaller than ever, more vulnerable. Anyone could walk up those stairs. Anyone could knock on that door. And what could he do to stop them? His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Reed, my name is Victor Crane. I represent a consortium of private collectors interested in the Whitmore estate. We're prepared to make you an immediate cash offer for the entire collection, sight unseen. $30 million, wire transfer within 48 hours. You keep the property, we take the contents, everyone walks away happy. 30 million for a collection worth 10 times that, Marcus said. You think I'm stupid? I think you're a working man with a child to protect. 30 million is more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes, and it's guaranteed. No auctions, no authentication battles, no legal fees, just clean money and a clean break. How did you get this number? Does it matter? Mr. Reed, I'm offering you a way out of a situation that's about to get very complicated. People are talking, the kind of people who don't wait for legal proceedings. Take the money. Protect your daughter. Marcus hung up. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. The threats escalated over the next week. Someone broke into his Suburban while he was at work, didn't steal anything, just left a note on the dashboard. Sell while you still can. His apartment building's lobby was vandalized with graffiti. Where's our cut, Reed? The local Facebook groups were filled with people claiming they knew the Whitmore family, that they deserved a piece of the estate, that Marcus was an outsider trying to steal what didn't belong to him. Castellano arranged for a security consultation. A firm out of Pittsburgh sent 2 specialists who walked Marcus through what protecting the estate would actually require. Their estimate was sobering: $160,000 per year for adequate security. Cameras, motion sensors, 24/7 monitoring, regular patrols, response teams. And that was just for the property. Personal security for Marcus and Lily would cost another $80,000 annually. We can't protect you on a factory worker's salary, the lead specialist said bluntly. You need to either liquidate fast or accept serious risk. Marcus also met with estate attorneys, tax specialists, and insurance brokers. The numbers they threw at him made his head spin. Property taxes, $75,000 per year. Insurance for the collection, estimated at $400,000 annually, assuming he could even get a policy, which most companies wouldn't issue without a full appraisal that would cost another $200,000. Legal fees to establish a trust or foundation, minimum $150,000. Climate control and building maintenance, $90,000 per year. He was looking at nearly $1 million in annual costs to keep the estate intact. Against that, he made $32,000 a year. The math was impossible. But the alternative was selling, and the more Marcus thought about it, the more it felt wrong. He'd started reading books about Frederick and Eleanor, researching their lives. Frederick had been a brilliant industrialist who'd given away half his fortune to charity before he died. Eleanor had been a patron of the arts, funding museums, scholarships, restoration projects. They'd used their wealth to make the world better. If Marcus sold the collection to the highest bidders, it would be scattered across the globe. That Picasso would end up in some billionaire's vault in Dubai. The rare books would go to private collectors who'd never let anyone see them. The wine would be drunk at exclusive parties. Everything Frederick and Eleanor had carefully preserved would be commodified, hidden away again, but this time for profit instead of love. Sarah's voice echoed in his head constantly during those days. He'd hear her in quiet moments, feel her presence when he stood in Lily's doorway watching her sleep. What would Sarah want? She'd always valued people over things, relationships over possessions, but she'd also believed in legacy, in passing something meaningful to the next generation. One night, Marcus drove to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. He hadn't been there in weeks, guilt gnawing at him. He sat on the cold ground beside her headstone, the stars bright overhead. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "Everyone says sell, take the money, give Lily a future. But Sarah, you should see what they built. It's not just stuff. It's a lifetime of care and intention. Eleanor spent 40 years keeping it all together, waiting for family to claim it. How can I just auction it off?" The wind moved through the cemetery trees. No answer came. "I'm scared," Marcus continued. "People are threatening us, trying to use Lily to get to me. This inheritance, it was supposed to be a gift, but it feels like a curse. I'm in over my head, and I don't have you to help me figure it out." He stayed there for an hour, talking to Sarah's grave like she could hear him, telling her about the mansion, about the collections, about the impossible choice he faced. And slowly, as he talked, something became clear. Sarah had always said their job wasn't to live for themselves, but to leave the world better than they found it. She'd volunteered at the library even when she was sick. She'd donated her time, her energy, her heart to causes that mattered. She wouldn't want Marcus to sell the collection just to make their lives comfortable. She'd want him to do something meaningful with it. But what? How could one broke, exhausted, grieving father turn a $300 million collection into something that mattered? The answer came from an unexpected source. On Saturday, Mrs. Patterson knocked on Marcus's door with a basket of muffins and her grandson, a college kid named Derek, who was studying nonprofit management. "Marcus, honey, Derek here was telling me about his classes, and I thought maybe he could help you think through your options with that estate." Derek was earnest, enthusiastic, and full of ideas. Over coffee at the kitchen table, while Lily colored in the living room, he explained how museum trusts worked, how foundations could be structured, how estate gifts could be leveraged for public good while still providing income for the donor's family. "If you establish the estate as a non-profit museum," Derek explained, "you could deduct a huge portion of its value from taxes. The collection stays intact, it's open to the public, and you could draw a salary as the director or curator. It wouldn't be millions, but it would be stable, legal, and meaningful." "How much would it cost to set something like that up?" Marcus asked. Derek did some quick calculations on his laptop. "Initial setup, maybe $200,000 in legal and filing fees. Then you'd need operating capital, probably $500,000 to get through the first year while you build membership and donor support. But Marcus, a collection like what you're describing, foundations would line up to help. Grants, endowments, partnerships with universities. This could actually work." Marcus felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. "What about security?" he asked. "The place needs serious protection." "That's where corporate sponsorships come in," Derek said. "Companies love being associated with cultural institutions. You could probably find a security firm willing to sponsor their services in exchange for naming rights or publicity. Same with insurance, renovation, even staffing." The idea took root in Marcus's mind. Not selling the collection, not scattering it to private buyers, but opening it to the world, creating something public and permanent, something that honored Frederick and Eleanor's legacy while making it accessible to people who could never afford to own such treasures themselves. But before he could even begin to explore the possibility, the situation escalated. On Tuesday night, Marcus returned from his factory shift to find police cars outside his apartment building. His heart stopped. Lily. He sprinted up the stairs, bursting through Mrs. Patterson's door where Lily was supposed to be. She was there, safe, playing with blocks on the floor, but Mrs. Patterson was pale, shaken. "Someone tried to break into your apartment," she said. "I heard the noise, called 911. They ran before police arrived, but Marcus, they broke your lock. They were definitely trying to get inside." Officer Davis took Marcus's statement. "Mr. Reed, I'm going to be straight with you. This inheritance has painted a target on your back. We're a small department. We can patrol your street, but we can't provide personal protection. You need to either move somewhere more secure or resolve this situation fast." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat in a chair watching Lily's bedroom door, a wrench from his toolbox in his lap. Every sound made him jump. Every car passing outside made his heart race. This wasn't sustainable. He couldn't live like this, couldn't let Lily grow up terrified. At 3 a.m, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your daughter is beautiful. Would be a shame if something happened to her. Sell the estate." Marcus's blood turned to ice. They'd been watching Lily. They knew what she looked like. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about Lily's safety. He called Castellano, waking the lawyer up. "They threatened Lily," Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "I'm done. Sell it. Sell everything. I don't care what we get. Just make this stop." Castellano was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, if you sell now under duress, you'll get pennies on the dollar. These people will have won. They'll have terrorized you into giving up hundreds of millions." "I don't care about the money," Marcus shouted. "I care about my daughter." I know you do. But Marcus, think about what Sarah would want. Would she want you to give in to bullies, or would she want you to fight for something bigger than yourselves?" Marcus was crying now, hot tears of frustration and fear. "I can't fight this. I'm nobody. I'm just a guy trying to survive." "No," Castellano said firmly. "You're the legal heir to one of the most significant private collections in the country. You have power here, Marcus. You just need to learn how to use it." The next morning, Castellano arranged an emergency meeting in Philadelphia. This time, he'd assembled a team: a criminal attorney specializing in harassment cases, a former FBI agent who now ran a private security firm, and a publicist who handled crisis management for high-profile clients. They sat in Castellano's conference room, and the criminal attorney, a woman named Diane Foster, spoke first. "Mr. Reed, what you're experiencing is called estate intimidation. It's illegal, and we can prosecute. But more importantly, we can use media coverage to your advantage. Right now, you're a victim being harassed in shadows. We flip that. We go public with your story, your intentions for the estate, your commitment to honoring the Whitmore legacy. Suddenly, anyone threatening you becomes the villain." The former FBI agent, Thomas Merrick, nodded. "I've reviewed the threats you've received. These aren't professionals. They're opportunists hoping to scare you into a quick sale. Once you establish proper security and make it clear you're not backing down, they'll move on to easier targets." "But Lily," Marcus said, "they threatened my daughter." "Which is why she needs protection," Merrick said. "I can have a team in Willow Creek by tomorrow. Discreet, professional. Your daughter won't even know they're there." The publicist, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel Kim, pulled out her tablet. "Here's what I'm proposing. We announce your intention to convert the Whitmore estate into a public museum and educational foundation. We frame you as a working-class hero honoring his wife's memory by making art and history accessible to everyone. We control the narrative before anyone else can." Marcus looked around the table at these people, these professionals who cost more per hour than he made in a week. "I can't afford any of this." Castellano leaned forward. "You can't afford not to, Marcus. And here's the thing. Once you commit to the museum path, funding becomes available. Grants, donations, sponsorships. We front the costs now, structure them as loans against the estate's future revenue. You don't pay a dime out of pocket." It all sounded too good to be true, but what choice did he have? Selling meant giving in to terrorists. Keeping the estate as a private collection meant perpetual fear. But opening it to the public, making it something bigger than himself, that might actually work. "Okay," Marcus said quietly. "Let's do it." The press conference happened 3 days later in Philadelphia. Rachel had coached Marcus on what to say, how to stand, how to look confident even though his stomach was churning. He wore a borrowed suit and stood behind a podium with microphones from every major news outlet in the region. "My name is Marcus Reed," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. 8 months ago, I lost my wife Sarah to cancer. She was everything to me and to our 6-year-old daughter Lily. Recently, I learned that Sarah's great-aunt, Eleanor Whitmore, had been searching for our family for years. When she passed away, she left us an estate containing one of the most significant private art and rare book collections in the country. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. "I've been approached by collectors, auction houses, and others interested in acquiring this collection. I've also been threatened, harassed, and intimidated by people who think they can bully me into selling. But I want to make something very clear. The Whitmore collection is not for sale. He paused, letting that sink in. Instead, I'm announcing the creation of the Whitmore Heritage Foundation, a non-profit educational institution that will preserve Frederick and Eleanor's collection and make it accessible to the public. This isn't about me getting rich. This is about honoring my wife's memory, honoring her family's legacy, and ensuring that art, history, and beauty belong to everyone, not just the wealthy few who can afford to hide them away. The room erupted with questions, but Rachel stepped in, fielding them professionally. Marcus made it through the conference without breaking down, though he wanted to. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the story went national. Marcus Reed, widowed factory worker turned museum founder, defending art and legacy against greedy collectors. The narrative was perfect, and public opinion swung heavily in his favor. Donations started coming in. Small amounts at first, $20 here, $50 there, from people who believed in what he was trying to do. Then larger checks from foundations and philanthropists who wanted to be associated with the project. Within a week, the foundation's bank account had $270,000 in commitments. More importantly, the threats stopped. Merrick's security team made their presence known in Willow Creek. The local police, energized by media attention, increased patrols, and the would-be intimidators melted back into the shadows, unwilling to be exposed as the villains in a feel-good story. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. He'd committed to something enormous, something that would consume his life for years to come. The factory job would have to go. The construction work, too. He'd have to become something he'd never imagined. A museum director, a public figure, a guardian of treasures worth more than small countries. Late one night, sitting in Lily's room watching her sleep, Marcus whispered to Sarah's memory, "I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope this is what you would have wanted." And in the quiet of that moment, he could almost feel her hand on his shoulder, hear her voice saying what she always said when he doubted himself. "You're stronger than you think, Marcus Reed. Now prove it." The first year was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying, exhausting chaos. Marcus quit the factory in March, 2 months after the press conference. His supervisor shook his hand and said, "Never thought I'd see the day Reed walked out of here to run a museum. Good luck, man." The construction job lasted another month before Marcus had to admit he couldn't do both. The foundation work consumed every waking hour. Meetings with lawyers, architects, insurance brokers, grant writers, security consultants. He learned a new vocabulary: provenance, conservation, climate control, non-profit governance, endowment structure. His brain, used to talk specs and shift schedules, now held information about humidity levels for rare books and proper lighting for oil paintings. Castellano helped him assemble a board of directors, people with actual credentials, a retired museum curator from the Philadelphia Museum of Art, a professor of art history from Penn State, a successful businesswoman who'd built a chain of boutique hotels and knew about hospitality and visitor experience. They met monthly in Castellano's conference room, and Marcus felt like an imposter every single time. "You belong here," the curator, an elegant woman in her 70s named Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, told him after one particularly brutal meeting where Marcus had stumbled over basic terminology. "Frederick and Eleanor didn't leave this collection to an expert. They left it to family. Your authenticity is what makes this special." The money came in waves. The initial public donations plateaued around $300,000, but then larger commitments arrived. The Ford Foundation gave $200,000 for educational programming. The Mellon Foundation matched it for conservation work. A tech billionaire who'd grown up poor in rural Pennsylvania wrote a personal check for $500,000, saying Marcus's story reminded him why he'd made his fortune in the first place. By June, they had $2.3 million in funding. It sounded like an impossible amount until the bills started coming in. The security system installation alone cost $470,000. Climate control upgrades for the mansion, $320,000. Insurance premiums for the first year, $680,000, and that was with a non-profit discount. Legal fees for establishing the foundation's structure, filing for tax-exempt status, creating bylaws and policies, $210,000. Marcus learned that money disappeared faster in this world than he'd ever imagined possible, but slowly, impossibly, the Whitmore estate began to transform. The overgrown gardens were cleared by a landscaping company that volunteered their services in exchange for being named the official ground sponsor. The mansion's exterior was cleaned, the stone restored to its original grey beauty. Broken windows were replaced. The roof was patched where 46 years of weather had found weak spots. Inside, conservators worked carefully through each room of the collection. Every book was examined, catalogued, placed in archival housing. Every painting was assessed, cleaned if needed, reframed with museum-grade materials. The coins were re-authenticated. The jewelry was appraised by 3 separate experts. The wine collection was moved to a state-of-the-art storage facility designed specifically for vintage bottles. The total appraised value, when all was counted, came to $347 million. The number made Marcus physically ill. "You're sitting on a cultural institution worth more than most small museums," Dr. Monroe said, reviewing the final inventory. "The rare book collection alone could support a dedicated library. The paintings represent nearly every major art movement from 1850 through 1975. Marcus, do you understand what you have here?" He did, and he didn't. He understood the numbers. He understood the historical significance. What he struggled with was feeling worthy of it. Lily, surprisingly, adapted faster than Marcus. At 7 now, she'd grown comfortable with the idea that the mansion was theirs, even though they still lived in the Willow Creek apartment. She'd started calling Eleanor Great-Great-Aunt Ellie like they'd known each other. She drew pictures of the mansion constantly, adding details that didn't exist: gardens full of flowers, flags flying from the towers, families walking through the front doors. "This is what it's going to look like when we open it," she'd say, showing Marcus her drawings. "That's beautiful, baby. Mommy would like it, wouldn't she?" Marcus's throat would tighten every time. "Yeah, she'd love it." They visited the estate every weekend, watching the transformation. Marcus had set up a small office in what had been Frederick's study. He'd kept everything exactly as it was: Frederick's pipe still in its ashtray, Eleanor's photographs still on the desk. He worked surrounded by their presence, and somehow it felt right. One Saturday in August, while Marcus was meeting with the exhibit designer, Lily wandered off. He found her 30 minutes later in Collection Room 8, the one with all the photographs of Frederick and Eleanor's life together. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking up at the images. "Daddy, they were really in love, weren't they?" Marcus sat beside her. "Yeah, they were." "Like you and Mommy?" "Yeah, just like that." Lily was quiet for a moment. "I think Great-Great-Aunt Ellie wanted us to have this because she knew Mommy was special, and she knew you'd take care of it the way Uncle Frederick would have." Marcus pulled his daughter close, fighting tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise," Lily said matter-of-factly. "You just noticed because you're not as tired anymore." She was right. The bone-deep exhaustion that had defined his life for the past year was lifting. Not gone, he still worked brutal hours, but it was different now. He was building something instead of just surviving. He fell into bed each night exhausted but fulfilled, and that made all the difference. The backlash, when it came, was uglier than Marcus expected. A local newspaper ran an opinion piece questioning whether an uneducated factory worker should be trusted with hundreds of millions in art. Online comments were vicious. "Who does this guy think he is? He's going to destroy everything through incompetence. The collection should be in a real museum, not some vanity project." Fox News ran a segment questioning whether the foundation was a tax dodge. Marcus Reed claims this is about public service, but he's paying himself a salary from non-profit funds. Is this really charity, or is this a scam? His salary was $75,000 a year, approved by the board and well within non-profit standards for an executive director. But the optics were bad. Factory worker inherits fortune, pays himself with charity money. Rachel, his publicist, went into overdrive doing damage control. Worse were the family claims. People came out of the woodwork insisting they were related to Frederick or Eleanor, that they deserved a piece of the estate. A woman in Ohio filed a lawsuit claiming she was Eleanor's illegitimate daughter. A man in Florida said Frederick had promised him a painting in 1973. None of the claims held legal water, but each one cost money to defend, time to address, energy to endure. This is what happens when you try to do something good, Diane Foster, his attorney, explained. People assume you're getting rich, so they want their cut. You just have to push through it. Marcus pushed through it, but there were nights he wanted to quit. Nights he lay awake, wondering if everyone was right, if he was in over his head, if he should have just sold everything and taken Lily somewhere quiet to live out their lives in peace. But then he'd get an email from a teacher asking when the museum would open because her students were learning about art conservation because of his story. Or a letter from someone who'd donated $20 saying they'd grown up poor and never thought art was for people like them until they heard about the Whitmore Foundation. Or he'd see Lily carefully dusting the picture frames in Eleanor's study, taking such pride in helping preserve the collection. Those moments reminded him why he was doing this. One particularly hard week in November, when a critical grant fell through and the HVAC system in the main gallery malfunctioned, Marcus sat in his truck outside the mansion at 2 a.m. and called Castellano. "I don't think I can do this," Marcus said, voice cracking. "Every time we solve one problem, 3 more show up. The conservator quit because she got a better offer in New York. The security company wants to renegotiate their contract, and some blogger is writing articles saying I'm destroying priceless art through neglect." Castellano was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, do you remember what you told me the day we opened Collection Room 1? You said you finally understood why Eleanor sealed everything away, because the responsibility was crushing." "Yeah, and it still is." "But you also said something else. You said Sarah would have wanted you to try anyway. Has that changed?" Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of Sarah. What would she say if she could see him now? She'd probably laugh at him for wallowing. She'd tell him to get his ass back to work. She'd remind him that nothing worth doing was ever easy. "No," Marcus said finally, "it hasn't changed." "Then tomorrow morning, you get up and you keep going. That's all any of us can do." The museum took shape over 18 months. The mansion's first and second floors were converted to gallery space while maintaining their historical integrity. Visitors would walk through Frederick and Eleanor's actual home, seeing how they'd lived, then descend to the climate-controlled galleries to view the collections up close. The rare book room became a working library where researchers could request access to specific volumes. The paintings were rotated through exhibitions, with some always on display and others brought out for special shows. The coin collection filled 2 galleries with interactive displays explaining monetary history. The jewelry was showcased in custom cases with lighting that made each piece sparkle like stars. But Marcus's favorite addition was the Education Center. Built in what had been the mansion's old carriage house, it held classrooms, a conservation lab where visitors could watch experts at work, and a community gallery where local artists could display their work alongside the masters. "Art shouldn't be intimidating," Marcus explained to a reporter during a preview tour. Frederick and Eleanor collected because they loved it, not because they wanted to show off. "We want people to come here and feel inspired, not excluded." Lily had her own contribution. She'd insisted on a children's gallery where kids could create their own art after viewing the collections. Because, she explained with 7-year-old logic, if they just look at stuff, they'll get bored. but if they can make their own paintings, they'll understand why the old ones are special. The board approved the Children's Gallery immediately. During the final weeks before opening, Marcus found himself forming unexpected friendships with his staff. There was James, the head of security, a former Marine who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan and understood what it meant to protect something precious. There was Maria, the education coordinator, who'd grown up in poverty and saw the museum as a way to give kids opportunities she'd never had. And there was Robert, the elderly maintenance supervisor who'd actually worked at the estate in the 1960s when Frederick and Eleanor were alive. Mr. Frederick was a good man, Robert told Marcus one afternoon while they were checking the HVAC system together. He used to talk to everyone who worked here, remembered our names, asked about our families. Mrs. Eleanor, she'd bring us lemonade in the summer. They weren't like rich people usually are.
What do you mean? Marcus asked.
They understood that money was just money. What mattered was what you did with it. Mr. Frederick used to say that wealth was a test, and most people failed it by hoarding or showing off. He said the real achievement was using it to make the world a little less hard for other people.
Marcus thought about that often in the days that followed. He'd passed the same test in a way. Given the choice between keeping the fortune private or sharing it publicly, he'd chosen to share. It hadn't been easy. It had cost him sleep, peace of mind, and countless moments of doubt. But standing in the completed museum, he knew he'd made the right choice. As opening day approached, Marcus felt the pressure building. They'd announced the date, June 15th, a Saturday. Invitations had gone out to donors, media, local officials, even the governor's office. Early membership sales had been strong. Over 3,000 people had bought annual passes before the museum even opened. But what if no one showed up? What if people came and hated it? What if he'd built something nobody wanted? "You're catastrophizing," Dr. Monroe told him during their final planning meeting. "Marcus, we have a waiting list of 200 school groups wanting to book field trips. You've created something people are desperate to experience. Trust that." The night before opening, Marcus couldn't sleep. He drove out to the estate at 2 a.m, let himself in with his key, and walked through the quiet galleries. The paintings glowed softly under their carefully calibrated lighting. The rare books rested in their climate-controlled cases. Everything was ready. He ended up in Frederick's study, sitting at the desk where he'd spent so many hours working. Eleanor's journal still sat open to that final entry, preserved under glass now, but still readable. "I hope we did right by you both," Marcus whispered to the empty room. "I hope this is what you wanted." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos of Sarah. There was one from Lily's 2nd birthday, Sarah holding her daughter, both of them covered in chocolate cake and laughing. Another from their 10th anniversary, a selfie they'd taken in their backyard, Sarah's head on his shoulder, both of them tired but happy. And one from her last week, taken in the hospital, where she'd insisted on putting on lipstick and smiling for the camera because she wanted Lily to remember her looking strong. "I miss you every single day," Marcus said to the photos. "But Sarah, I think we're going to be okay. Lily's happy. I'm building something that matters, and I finally feel like I'm honoring your memory the right way." The morning of June 15th dawned clear and perfect. Marcus dressed Lily in the new dress they'd bought for the occasion, purple with white flowers, just like the one she'd worn to Philadelphia all those months ago. He wore a suit that actually fit, purchased for the occasion by Rachel, who'd insisted he needed to look the part. They arrived at the estate at 8, 2 hours before the official opening. The staff was already there, 75 people total, curators, security guards, gift shop attendants, education coordinators, maintenance crew. Marcus had hired many from Willow Creek, giving jobs to people who'd been struggling just like he had. Mrs. Patterson was there too, working as a gallery guide. "Wouldn't miss this for the world," she'd said when he offered her the position. By 9:30, the line of people stretched down the driveway and onto the road.
Marcus stood at the window of his office, watching them arrive. Families, art students, elderly couples, teenagers with sketchbooks, hundreds of them, waiting to see what he'd built. "Daddy, there's so many people," Lily breathed, pressed against the window beside him. "Yeah, baby, there are." At 10 o'clock exactly, Marcus and Lily stood at the front entrance. A ribbon had been stretched across the doorway. Cameras from every news station in the state pointed at them. The crowd had grown to nearly 1,000 people. Castellano stood beside Marcus, handing him a microphone. Marcus's hands shook as he took it. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice amplified across the crowd. 18 months ago, I was a factory worker, barely making ends meet. Then I inherited something I never expected, not just money or property, but a responsibility. Frederick and Eleanor Whitmore spent 37 years building a collection that represented their love for art, history, and beauty. They could have sold it. They could have kept it private. Instead, they preserved it and waited for family to share it with the world. He paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. My wife, Sarah, died before she could know about this place, but I believe she guided me here. She always said our job wasn't to live for ourselves, but to leave the world better than we found it. So today, we're opening the Whitmore Heritage Foundation not as a shrine to the past, but as a gift to the future. This belongs to all of you now. He handed Lily the scissors. Together they cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered and the doors opened wide. Watching thousands of people flow through the mansion over that first day was surreal. Marcus stood to the side, observing. He saw a little boy stand transfixed in front of the Picasso, his mouth forming a perfect O of wonder. He watched an elderly woman cry quietly in the rare book library, running her fingers along the spines like they were sacred. He overheard a teenager tell her friend, "I didn't know art could make you feel like this." In the children's gallery, Lily had stationed herself as an unofficial guide, showing kids how to use the painting supplies, explaining which artists had inspired her favorite pieces. She was radiant, confident, so much like Sarah, it made Marcus's heart ache. Late in the afternoon, a woman approached Marcus. She was in her 60s, well-dressed, with kind eyes that looked familiar somehow. "Mr. Reed, I'm Catherine Morrison. I was Eleanor's closest friend for 40 years. Marcus's breath caught. "You're the Catherine from her letters?" "Yes, I tried to convince Eleanor to reach out to Sarah sooner, but she was so worried about disrupting her life, about seeming like she wanted something. And then Sarah passed, and Eleanor was devastated. She died 6 months later, and I've always believed it was partly from regret." "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I wish they could have met." Catherine shook her head, smiling through tears. "But don't you see? They did meet through you. Eleanor used to tell me that family wasn't just blood, it was spirit. She said she'd know her family when she found them because they'd understand what she and Frederick had been trying to do. And Marcus, looking at what you've built here, I know she found her family after all." They talked for an hour, Catherine sharing stories about Eleanor and Frederick that brought them to life in ways the photographs never could. She told him about their travels, their arguments over which paintings to buy, the way Frederick would read aloud to Eleanor from rare books while she sketched in her journal. She painted a picture of a marriage built on shared passion and mutual respect. "They would be so proud of you," Catherine said as she prepared to leave. "Not because you preserved their collection, but because you understood its purpose. Art isn't meant to be locked away, it's meant to transform people." Dr. Monroe found him late in the afternoon, pressed into a corner of the main gallery, watching the crowds. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Overwhelmed," Marcus admitted. "This is really happening." "This is really happening," she agreed. "And Marcus, you should know, the early numbers are exceptional. We had over 3,000 visitors today. If this keeps up, we'll hit our first-year attendance projections in 6 months." The success continued. Reviews in art journals were glowing. The New York Times ran a feature calling the Whitmore Collection one of the most significant private holdings to enter public access in decades. Travel magazines listed it as a must-see destination. Schools booked field trips months in advance. But more importantly, regular people came. Families from small towns who'd never been to a major museum, working-class folks who'd always thought art wasn't for them, kids who discovered they loved painting or history or simply being in beautiful spaces. Marcus started a program offering free admission to anyone with an EBT card or proof of financial hardship. The board questioned it initially, worried about revenue, but Marcus was firm. Eleanor and Frederick had money, but they understood value, he said. The value of art isn't what someone will pay for it. It's what it does to your soul when you experience it. No one should be excluded because they're poor. I won't allow it. The program stayed, and it became one of the Foundation's most celebrated features. 6 months after opening, the Foundation's financial picture was stronger than anyone had projected. Membership revenue, donations, grants, and admission fees had generated $4.2 million. After operating expenses, they had a surplus of $800,000, which the board voted to add to the endowment. At this rate, the accountant explained during a board meeting, the foundation will be self-sustaining within 3 years. You won't need to rely on major donations to keep the doors open. Marcus was finally drawing his full salary, and it was enough, not extravagant, but enough to move Lily and himself out of the apartment and into a small cottage on the estate grounds. It had been the property manager's residence back when the estate was active. They renovated it carefully, keeping its historic character, and Marcus finally had a home that felt stable. Lily's bedroom overlooked the gardens, now restored to something resembling their original glory. She could see the mansion from her window, and sometimes Marcus would find her at night, curtains open, just looking at it. "You okay, baby?" he'd ask. "I'm perfect," she'd say. "I was just thinking about Mommy, about how she'd love that we live in a castle now." It's not really a castle. Close enough. Unexpected gifts kept coming. An anonymous donor gave $200,000 with a note saying the museum had inspired them to reconnect with their estranged daughter. A famous artist visited and was so moved that she donated one of her own paintings to the permanent collection. Universities started reaching out, wanting to partner on research projects using the rare book collection. But the most meaningful gift came from Willow Creek itself. The town that had once whispered about the weird widower now embraced the foundation as their own. Local businesses offered discounts to museum members. The diner added a Whitmore special to their menu. The high school started an art club specifically to prepare students for visits to the foundation. Marcus was invited to speak at Lily's school during Career Day. Standing in front of 30 second graders, he told them his story. About working 2 jobs, about losing someone he loved, about inheriting something scary and choosing to share it instead of selling it. "The most important thing I learned," he said, "is that you don't have to be rich or educated or special to do something that matters. You just have to care more about helping others than helping yourself." One kid raised his hand. "But Mr. Reed, you are special. You're basically a superhero." Marcus laughed. "I'm just a dad who got lucky and tried to do the right thing." After the presentation, a teacher pulled him aside. "You don't realize what you've done for this town, do you? Kids here, they grow up thinking their only options are factory work or leaving. You've shown them something different is possible." One evening, about 8 months after opening, Marcus was locking up the museum when he noticed an older man sitting on a bench in the sculpture garden. The gardens closed at 6, but something about the man's posture, hunched and sorrowful, made Marcus approach instead of asking him to leave. "Sir, we're closed for the evening." The man looked up, and Marcus saw tears on his weathered cheeks. "I'm sorry, I needed a minute. This place, it saved my life today." Marcus sat down beside him. "You want to talk about it?" The man wiped his eyes. "My name's Daniel. My son died 3 months ago. Car accident. He was 22, and I've been, lost. Today was his birthday, and I didn't know where to go, what to do. I saw your museum advertised and thought maybe it would distract me." "Did it help?" Marcus asked gently. "More than that. I saw the photographs in that back room, all those pictures of Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, their whole life together, and I read her journal entry about preserving beauty even through grief. And I realized my son loved art. He was studying graphic design, and I've been so focused on what I lost that I forgot to honor what he loved." Daniel pulled out his phone and showed Marcus photos of his son's artwork, digital paintings, vibrant and full of life. "These are incredible," Marcus said. I know this is probably inappropriate, but would you consider displaying some of his work in your community gallery maybe? I don't want money. I just want people to see what he created. I want his art to outlive him." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Daniel, I'd be honored. Bring me whatever you have and we'll create a memorial exhibition. Your son's work deserves to be seen." They sat together in the fading light, two fathers bound by loss, finding comfort in the shared language of grief and beauty. When Daniel finally left, he hugged Marcus hard and said, "Thank you for building this place. You probably saved more lives than you know." A year after opening, the foundation hosted an anniversary gala. Donors, board members, community leaders, everyone who'd supported the project gathered in the mansion's grand ballroom. It had been restored to its 1920s glory: crystal chandeliers, polished floors, live music from a jazz quartet. Marcus gave a speech thanking everyone who'd helped, but when he finished the formal remarks, he asked for one more minute. "I want to tell you about Eleanor Whitmore," he said. "I never met her, but I've read her journals, her letters, the notes she left throughout this house. She was lonely after Frederick died. She had all this wealth, all these beautiful things, but no one to share them with, so she searched for family. She spent years tracking down descendants she'd never met, hoping that someday someone would appreciate what she and Frederick had built." He paused, looking around the room full of people. "Eleanor died thinking she'd failed. She never got to meet Sarah, never knew about Lily, never saw this foundation open. But I hope, wherever she is, she can see this room tonight. Because, Eleanor, you didn't fail. You gave us something more valuable than money. You gave us purpose." There wasn't a dry eye in the ballroom. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep in their cottage, Marcus walked through the quiet museum alone. He did this sometimes, just wandered the galleries, reminding himself this was real. He ended up, as he often did, in Collection Room 8, surrounded by photographs of Frederick and Eleanor. They smiled at him from frames, frozen in moments of joy from decades past. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, "for trusting me with this, for believing family mattered more than keeping it all locked away." He pulled out his phone and looked at his wallpaper, a photo of Sarah taken a few months before she got sick. She was laughing, her head thrown back, completely herself. "We did it," he told her image. "We built something that'll outlive us, something that matters." His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Monroe. "Just got word. The museum was named one of the top 10 new cultural institutions in the country by the American Alliance of Museums. Congratulations, Director Reed." Marcus smiled. Director Reed. A year ago, the title had felt like a costume, something he was playing at. Now it felt earned. He made his way back to the cottage, checking on Lily one more time before heading to his own room. She'd spread her drawings across her desk, sketches of new exhibits she wanted to create, ideas for programs to help other kids discover art. "She's gonna run this place someday," Marcus said softly. And maybe that was the real fortune Eleanor had left them. Not the $347 million in art and treasures, not the mansion or the land or the foundation itself, but the opportunity to build a legacy that would pass from generation to generation, growing and changing and touching lives long after Marcus was gone. He thought about the keys Castellano had given him that day in Philadelphia, heavy brass keys that opened a sealed mansion. They'd opened more than doors. They'd opened a future he never could have imagined. Marcus Reed had started as a man barely surviving, working 2 jobs to keep his daughter fed, drowning in grief and medical debt. He could have sold the Whitmore collection and lived comfortably for the rest of his life. Instead, he'd chosen something harder: to honor the people who came before him, to serve the people around him, to build something that would outlast him. And in doing so, he'd discovered what Eleanor had known all along: the real treasure wasn't what you owned, but what you gave away. 2 years into the Foundation's operation, Marcus stood on the mansion's front steps on a crisp autumn morning. Yellow school buses were pulling up the driveway, carrying kids from 3 different districts for a joint field trip. Lily, now 9, was inside preparing for her role as junior docent, something she did every Saturday. His phone rang. Castellano. "Marcus, I wanted to give you some news. We've had an inquiry from the Smithsonian. They're interested in a partnership, possibly a traveling exhibition of selected pieces from the collection." "The Smithsonian wants our stuff?" "They want to share your vision. You've proven that private collections can serve the public good better than institutions sometimes can. They want to learn from what you've built." After hanging up, Marcus sat on the steps and watched the kids pour out of the buses. They were loud, excited, chaotic. Teachers tried to organize them into lines, but enthusiasm won out. They surged toward the entrance like a wave. This was what it was all about: not prestigious partnerships or national recognition. This: kids discovering that beauty and history were theirs to claim, regardless of where they came from or how much money their parents made. "Daddy!" Lily called from the doorway. "They're here! Are you ready?" Marcus stood, brushed off his pants and smiled. "Yeah, baby, I'm ready." Walking into the mansion beside his daughter, surrounded by children experiencing wonder maybe for the first time, Marcus finally understood what Sarah had tried to tell him during those last weeks of her life. She'd said, "Marcus, we don't get to choose what happens to us. We only get to choose what we do with it." He'd been given grief, debt, exhaustion, and impossible responsibility. But he'd also been given keys to a sealed mansion, a daughter who believed in magic, and the chance to honor a love story that had started before he was born. What he'd chosen to do with it wasn't just build a museum. He'd built a second life, not just for himself, but for everyone who walked through these doors searching for something beautiful in a world that often felt harsh. That evening, as the last tour group departed and the staff began closing procedures, Marcus found himself in the main gallery one more time. He stood in front of the Picasso, the same one that had been valued at $75,000, and he thought about value itself. What made something valuable? The price tag? The artist's name? Or was it the way it made a child stop and stare, the way it pulled tears from a grieving father, the way it reminded people that beauty still existed in a broken world? He thought about Eleanor's final journal entry, the one he'd read so many times he had it memorized. She'd written about stewardship versus ownership, about being caretakers of treasures that belonged to everyone. Marcus had spent the last 2 years learning what that meant. It meant late nights balancing budgets. It meant difficult conversations with donors who wanted control. It meant saying no to private collectors offering millions for individual pieces. It meant choosing the hard path over and over because the easy path would betray everything Frederick and Eleanor had built. But it also meant watching Daniel's face when his son's artwork went on display. It meant reading letters from kids who'd never thought about college until they visited the museum and discovered what they wanted to study. It meant knowing that $347 million worth of art wasn't locked in a vault somewhere, but was out in the world doing what art was meant to do, transforming lives. Lily found him standing there, lost in thought. "Daddy, everyone's gone. Can we go home now?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, this incredible little person who'd lost her mother but somehow remained full of light. She'd grown so much in the past 2 years, more confident, more thoughtful, more herself. "Yeah, baby, let's go home." They walked through the mansion together, turning off lights, checking locks. It was their routine now, this nightly ritual of putting the museum to bed. And as they stepped out into the cool evening air, Marcus looked back at the building one more time. The mansion glowed softly in the twilight, lit from within by the security lights that protected its treasures. It looked magical, timeless, exactly like the castle Lily had always imagined it to be. "Daddy," Lily said, taking his hand, "when I grow up, I want to run this place. I want to take care of it like you do." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You will, baby. You'll take care of it even better than me." And he believed that. Someday, Lily would stand where he stood now, making impossible decisions about preservation and access, balancing the sacred with the practical. But she'd do it with the foundation he'd built, with the lessons he'd learned, with the example he'd set. That was the real inheritance. Not money, or art, or property, but the knowledge that one person, armed with nothing but courage and conviction, could build something that mattered. Anyone can choose legacy over fortune if they're brave enough to believe that what we leave behind matters more than what we take with us. As Marcus Reed watched his daughter guide a group of wide-eyed children through galleries worth hundreds of millions, he understood something profound. The real inheritance Eleanor Whitmore had left wasn't art or books or treasure. It was the opportunity to prove that one person, no matter how ordinary, can build something extraordinary if they choose service over self-interest, generosity over greed, and legacy over luxury. The factory worker who once couldn't afford to fix his car now directed a foundation that would impact generations. Because for Marcus, Lily, and everyone whose life would be touched by the Whitmore Heritage Foundation, the story wasn't about wealth discovered. It was about purpose found. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe ordinary people can build extraordinary legacies.